Hey everybody, back with another Survivor video, this time for NFL Week 7. Let's kick it off with this week's matchups in top 9 heaviest favorite teams heading into Week 7. Looking at this week's games, you get a couple bigger spreads here by more than a field goal or even up to 8.5 points here, and you get some teams that are closer to that 3.5, 3 mark that we see a lot of home teams get, which we want to be a little bit more cautious about because obviously these teams are a little bit less likely to win. But as always, it's important to check the schedule for each of these teams. There are going to be teams here that you can identify a lot of situations this season and even in the subsequent weeks in the near future where you're going to take these teams. And there are other teams where this might be a one and done opportunity for the rest of the season because they don't have a lot of great survivor prospects. So as always, good to check the schedule. Let's start it off as we always do with the proceed with caution, and I'm going to follow a similar rule which has hurt a lot of teams this season and a lot of survivor picks this season, and that's really staying away from away teams playing a divisional opponent. And I'm going to start here with the Eagles at the Giants. I think right off the bat, a lot of people watching this video are going to be rebuffed and think that's crazy. There's no way the Giants can beat the Eagles here, even at home. Malik Neighbors has been out. He's likely to play this game, but the Eagles are getting A.J. Brown back. They have A.J. Brown back. They get Devonta Smith back. They got Saquon Barkley. They're the much better team. The Eagles are without a doubt a better team, but their defense has gaping holes in it. One of the worst defensive units in all of the NFL, spanning back to like week 14 of last year when the Eagles really started their decline from Super Bowl contender. The Giants have been playing really tough football despite losing to the Bengals. I was actually impressed with the way they were able to play that game. I thought the Bengals, being as desperate as they were going to put up a much better fight, or at least win by a much greater margin. And credit to the Giants without Malik Neighbors for really hanging in that football game. Again, this line has already moved towards the Giants' favor. It was -3.5 and is slowly getting more and more bets in the Giants, pushing this line to -3. It is definitely a trap line where I think a lot of people are going to love the Eagles right away, but something that I really would think long and hard about because there's something a little bit suspicious about this line in the Eagles only being favored by 3 points in this matchup against the Giants. These division rival games, it's really tough to predict what's going to happen. The Giants here are on the wrong end of a losing streak here, and I think it's time for them to pick it back up. They've certainly shown a lot of fight last week. I would imagine them to put up a big fight this week and keep this game close. Again, I think because of the weaknesses and really gaping holes in this Eagles defense that you'll see a good shot at the Giants winning this game. Same situation here with the Bengals at the Browns, another team that is much better than their opponent, and this spread implies it a little bit more so than the Eagles-Giants here, but you're on the road against the divisional opponent. For the Browns, it definitely seems like they are a sinking ship after just sending off Amari Cooper to the Bills. But this defense is still a legitimate defense, and it can pose a threat against the Bengals, who don't have and cannot boast a above average defense here. We've seen this Bengals defense get cut up and torn up by a lot of different offenses this year. The Browns here getting Nick Chubb back. Could be a little bit more dangerous, should be a little bit more dangerous on the ground in his presence. David Njoku at tight end coming back after a few absences, really starting to get his footing after his game last week. I don't think this game is as scary to me as the Giants, but it does concern me that the Browns, who at least last year had a very nice home field advantage, are hosting divisional opponents. They've been down and out, losing a lot of games. Even bad teams in the NFL don't go on really sustained losing streaks all that often. I would imagine a team that has a lot of talent, at least on the defense side of the football, like the Browns, can always pull out a game here and there. This might be one of them as we're seeing the Bengals struggle. I will say, because the Bengals are so behind the 8 ball in terms of their record in a tough division, in a tough conference, every game now until they claw back to 500 is seemingly must win. So that's point for the Bengals in their favor. But I thought that last week when they played the Giants and they barely won that game, at least I think that game's a lot closer than the final score implied going down to the last few minutes. I've not been impressed with the Bengals this season. Going on the road against the divisional opponent makes me really wary to take them this week. One final game that I'm a little concerned about, and probably the game you should be most cautious about, in my opinion, is the Falcons hosting the Seahawks here. This is a Seahawks team that started 3-0 to start the season and is since on a 3-game losing streak. I just mentioned with the Browns, even bad teams don't go on sustained losing streaks all that often in the NFL, and the Seahawks are far away from a bad team. Certainly not as poor of a team as all the other teams that are on the wrong side of the survivor list this week and aren't favored. The spread at -3 for the Falcons at home is implying these two teams are even. I think the Seahawks are a little bit more desperate, and I also think the Seahawks are arguably the better team. They have a very similar makeup to this Falcons offense where they have a solid running back, it's a solid duo of running backs with the Falcons who have Bijan Robinson and Tyler Algier. Seahawks have Kenneth Walker III and receiving back Zach Charbonnet. Some solid wide receivers for the Seahawks. You got Drake London, Darnell Mooney playing well in the slot. For Seattle, you have DK Metcalf, who's their big vertical threat, and then Jackson Smith-Njigba and Tyler Lockett in the slot. And some quarterbacks who can be turnover prone in Geno Smith and Kirk Cousins, but also have shown to be throwing the ball for many, many yards this entire season. So very comparable on offense. I think very comparable on defense, with the secondary and the Seahawks and Falcons both being the strength. Quite honestly, I like the Seahawks here in a pretty even matchup to win this game, even on the road, as they got to stop their skid and losing streak this week. Be careful of the hungry Seahawks this week in Atlanta. That leads us to the best pick this week, and to no surprise, it's the team that is favored by the most and given the highest odds to win, and that's the Bills, who, they're coming off a short week playing Monday Night Football against a very physical Jets team, but lucky for them, they're at home, and they're playing a very weak and underperforming Tennessee Titans team with Will Levis at quarterback that has seemed to not have any of the answers in his arsenal. As long as Will Levis is playing quarterback for the Titans, you can be fairly confident that you have a good pick here if you're taking the opponent, especially as the Titans are on the road here in Buffalo. But Levis and this Titans offense has been largely anemic all season long. The defense, while they don't have the best PFF stats, have held teams to a pretty low points per game total, but the offense has not been able to capitalize on just about any game they played. If you can't put up points, and especially it's the passing offense that has been struggling for the Titans, if you can't succeed in that facet of the football game, you're just not going to beat the Buffalo Bills, who are incredibly efficient with Josh Allen, a quarterback who has not thrown an interception this year. They got a great run game. Whether or not James Cook is at running back battling a turf toe injury, that offensive line has been rebuilt and is playing great. And not to mention the Bills just went out, as I mentioned, and acquired Amari Cooper at wide receiver, thus bolstering their offensive potential and passing potential even more. Bills look to keep rolling this week, and I think it's a great pick against the Titans here. But there's a lot of games, or at least one game here that stands out to me that is of enormous value this week, and that's the Jacksonville Jaguars, who have had a really tough go this season and haven't been able to put many W's in that win column. But they're lucky that they face the Patriots, who are in the same situation as them, as a one-win team heading to London for this game. The Jaguars, however, have been in London as of the last week, as they just hosted the Bears, I think technically visiting the Bears last week. But they're already acclimated to the time change. They're already practicing and have the body clock of London time, whereas the Patriots don't get that benefit. And I really think that is a huge advantage this game. All else equal, two teams in the same talent level. The fact that the Jaguars get to have that time in a week of preparation in London, I think is huge. Add on to the fact that I don't think these teams are equal, and I do think the talent level skews towards the Jaguars. That makes me even more so in favor of them. Again, Trevor Lawrence has not been playing well this season, but I do firmly believe he's a solid quarterback. And certainly, if you don't agree with that, I think it's hard to say that he's a worse quarterback than Drake May. We haven't seen much from Drake May, granted, but going in your second career start in London against a Jacksonville team, against any team, is not it's not an easy situation to be in, let alone the fact that the Patriots have one of the worst offensive lines in any team in football this season, allowing like 5 sacks a game, it seems like, to opponents, as that offensive line cannot stop the pass rush at all. If the Jaguars can get even a lead at any point in this game, but especially an early lead, with the way that Patriots O-line has been playing, that should be a great game for the Jags to get a win against a subpar opponent. You're not going to see the Jacksonville Jaguars favored by 5.5 points at a neutral site at any point in the season. They might not be favored by 5.5 at home at any point this season. This is a great value to take for the Jaguars. Just one more thing, because I did mention the home field advantage versus neutral site. I've mentioned it many times before that home field advantage is worth 3 points. And if you think about that, the Bills at a neutral site would be favored at 5.5 points as well. So they're saying, Vegas, the odds makers are saying that the advantage that the Jaguars have over the Patriots is the same talent-wise as the Bills over the Titans. If these games were both at neutral sites, which the Jaguars game is, they would both be favored by 5.5. I think that's very telling and a compelling case to take the Jaguars this week. It's a great value play. Other picks, you got the Commanders at the Panthers. The way the Commanders have looked, it's really tough not to want to take them this week. Jaden Daniels in this offense is firing in all cylinders and looks to be very legitimate. My one concern is that, one, they have to fall back to earth eventually, this Commanders team, and two, their defense is really not that talented, and that concerns me against any survivor matchup just because they are susceptible to letting up the home run play. They are susceptible to letting even a team like the Panthers and Andy Dalton, putting up a lot of points. So if one day the offense isn't clicking, then that sets you up for a real big failure in terms of survivor. I generally like to take teams with a better defense. So I think while it's a great pick for the Commanders, I have a little bit of caution around it. That being said, if you've taken the Bills already, if you've taken the Jags already, then it's probably a solid pick to take the Commanders the way their offense has looked and the way that Jaden Daniels is looking like a seasoned veteran after 5 or 6 games in the NFL. Another game that I think has had a lot of value, not quite as much value as the Jaguars, is the Rams coming off a bye against the Raiders in LA. The Raiders have signaled that they, like the Jaguars, are in a real rebuild mode after they shipped off Davante Adams to the Jets in exchange for, I think, a 3rd-round pick. So not quite as big as a haul as you'd expect for a player of Davante Adams' caliber. But another one of their star players on the Raiders, Max Crosby, their D-end, is disgruntled as well and asking for a trade. So things are not good here under head coach Antonio Pierce in Las Vegas for this Raiders team. On the flip side, you get a Rams team coming off a bye, plenty of time and opportunity to prepare for this game against the Raiders, and a team like the Rams that with only one win, that had playoff aspirations before the season started. I really am a big believer in head coaching, and I think Sean McVay is a great head coach. And even if he had subpar talent, I would, expect him to pull out games and wins with a team over a lesser head coach. Now, the Rams are fortunate enough where, again, given some extra rest, which is much needed given their woes to their offensive line, are going up against a Raiders team that hasn't had a lot of talent and has had a real struggle stopping the pass game. The worst coverage unit in all of football right now. So I would expect Matt Stafford in this wide receiver group, even without Cooper Kupp, even without Puka Nacua, to go out and thrash this Raiders secondary and get a win column after a bye week. I think you got a great opportunity and great value here with the Rams as well. Here's a game that I probably should have put on the proceed with caution list, and that's the Ravens on the road against the Bucs. These are 2 playoff teams, and the Ravens defense is not up to the caliber that it had been last season, winning the Triple Crown, forcing the most sacks, allowing the fewest amount of points, and enforcing the most turnovers, which I don't think has ever been done since I started recording those stats way back in the day. So an elite defense last year, arguably one of the best in recent memory, is no longer that same unit this year, despite not many departures, just some players getting old and some new coaching. But they're going up against a Bucs team that has a real propensity to put up a lot of points offensively. You're seeing no signs of guys like Mike Evans and Chris Godwin at wide receiver slowing down, and Baker Mayfield really has the offensive unit going there in Tampa. Add on to the fact that the Ravens are on the road here. I don't love the spot they're in. You're certainly going to get many better opportunities to take the Ravens here, so I would avoid them given the circumstances going up against a real solid Buccaneers team. And then finally, you get the Colts at home, starting and getting Anthony Richardson back at quarterback, facing off against the Dolphins, who are still without Tua Tagovailoa, but they are coming off a bye week here, which I place a tremendous amount of weight in because then you get just double the time to not only prepare for your opponent and study their film and game, but you also get a lot of much needed rest, even this early in the season. The guys get worn down in these extremely physical games. Because of that, I'm a little bit wary of the Colts. I'm not so sure that getting Anthony Richardson back is not a deficit or a downfall for this Colts offense, because I think Joe Flacco was very serviceable at quarterback, winning games in Anthony Richardson's absence. You saw what Joe Flacco was able to do with the Browns last year, so I question the decision to yank him so quickly into his tenure this season, but I understand that you drafted Anthony Richardson with a top 5 pick. You've seen a lot of talent with him so far, and you want him to develop. So I understand that, but I'm not sure it helps them win games in the short run for right now, which is a little bit concerning going against a Dolphins team that has a tremendous amount of talent at the wide receiver position with Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle, two of the premier deep threats in this league. It concerns me, if I was a Colts taker this week in Survivor, what those two guys can do and how they can really take the top off of defense. I think that in this bye week, a head coach and offensive play caller, Mike McDaniel, can really dial up some plays that will allow the quarterback in the system, Tyler Huntley, and the players in it to succeed against a Colts defense that has not been playing up to the level that we've seen the last few years with some departures and change in coaching there. I don't think this is the week to take the Colts, only favored by 3.5 at home, implying that this game is basically a pick-em, a half-point favorite here for the Colts. Not a good spot going up against the Dolphins team that I think will look better than what we've seen in weeks past, given the bye week, given the extra time to prepare and draw up new plays, given the personnel changes they've had, especially at quarterback, over the last few weeks. But that's all I got for this week. As always, let me know in the comment section if you need any help or need any advice. If I didn't cover the teams that maybe you wanted to hear about, let me know and I'll do my best to help out.